Upfront Books presents All Our Relations, Native Struggles for Land and Life, written by Winona LaDuke and narrated by Jess Morris. Introduction. We are a part of everything that is beneath us, above us, and around us. Our past is our present is our future, and our future is 7 generations past and present. Haudenosaunee Teaching. The last 150 years have seen a great Holocaust. There have been more species lost in the past 150 years than since the Ice Age. During the same time, indigenous peoples have been disappearing from the face of the earth. Over 2,000 nations of indigenous peoples have gone extinct in the Western Hemisphere, and 1 nation disappears from the Amazon rainforest every year. There is a direct relationship between the loss of cultural diversity and the loss of biodiversity. Wherever indigenous peoples still remain, there is also a corresponding enclave of biodiversity. Trickles of rivers still running in the Northwest are home to the salmon still being sung back by native people. The last few Florida panthers remain in the presence of traditional Seminoles, hidden away in the great cypress swamps of the Everglades. Some of the largest patches of remaining prairie grasses sway on reservation lands. 1/2 of all reservation lands in the United States is still forested, much of it old growth. Remnant, pristine forest ecosystems from the northern boreal forests to the Everglades largely overlap with native territories. In the Northwest, virtually every river is home to a people, each as distinct as a species of salmon. The Tillamook, Siletz, Yaquina, Alsea, Siuslaw, Umpqua, Hanes, Miluk, Colville, Tututni, Shasta, Costa, and Chetco are all peoples living at the mouths of salmon rivers. 107 stocks of salmon have already become extinct in the Pacific Northwest, and 89 are endangered. Salmon were put here by the Creator, and it is our responsibility to harvest and protect the salmon so that the cycle of life continues, explains Pearson Mitchell of the Columbia River Intertribal Fishing Commission. Whenever we have a funeral, we mourn our loved one, yes, but we are also reminded of the loss of our salmon and other traditional foods, laments Bill Yallop Sr., the Yakima Tribal Chairman. The stories of the fish and the people are not so different. Environmental destruction threatens the existence of both. The Thai band of the lower Deschutes River in Oregon includes a scant 5 families, struggling to maintain their traditional way of life in relationship to the salmon. I wanted to dance the salmon, know the salmon, say goodbye to the salmon, says Susanna Santos, a Thai artist, fisherwoman, and community organizer. Now I am looking at the completion of destruction, from the Exxon Valdez to those dams. 17 fish came down the river last year. None this year. The people are the salmon, and the salmon are the people. How do you quantify that? Native American teachings describe the relations all around. Animals, fish, trees, and rocks, as our brothers, sisters, uncles, and grandpas. Our relations to each other, our prayers whispered across generations to our relatives are what bind our cultures together. The protection, teachings, and gifts of our relatives have for generations preserved our families. These relations are honored in ceremony, song, story, and life that keep relations close to buffalo, sturgeon, salmon, turtles, bears, wolves, and panthers. These are our older relatives, the ones who came before and taught us how to live. Their obliteration by dams, guns, and bounties is an immense loss to Native families and cultures. Their absence may mean that a people sing to a barren river, a caged bear or buffalo far away. It is the struggle to preserve that which remains and the struggle to recover that characterizes much of Native environmentalism. It is these relationships that industrialism seeks to disrupt. Native communities will resist with great determination. Salmon was presented to me and my family through our religion as our brother, the same with the deer. And our sisters are the roots and berries, and you would treat them as such. Their life to you is just as valuable as another person's would be. Margaret Saluskin, Yakima. The toxic invasion of Native America. There are over 700 Native nations on the North American continent. Today, in the United States, Native America covers 4% of the land with over 500 federally recognized tribes. Over 1,200 Native American reserves dot Canada. The Inuit homeland, Nunavut, formerly one-half of the Northwest Territories, is an area of land and water, including Baffin Island, 5 times the size of Texas, or the size of the entire Indian subcontinent. 85% of the population is Native. While Native peoples have been massacred and fought, cheated and robbed of their historical lands, today their lands are subject to some of the most invasive industrial interventions imaginable. According to the World Watch Institute, 317 reservations in the United States are threatened by environmental hazards, ranging from toxic waste to clear cuts. Reservations have been targeted as sites for 16 proposed nuclear waste dumps. Over 100 proposals have been floated in recent years to dump toxic waste in Indian communities. 77 sacred sites have been disturbed or desecrated through resource extraction and development activities. The federal government is proposing to use Yucca Mountain, sacred to the Shoshone, as a dump site for the nation's high-level nuclear waste. Over the last 45 years, there have been 1,000 atomic explosions on western Shoshone land in Nevada, making the western Shoshone the most bombed nation on Earth. Over 1,000 slag piles and tailings from abandoned uranium mines sit on dying land, leaking radioactivity into the air and water. Nearby is the largest coal strip mine in the world, and some groups of dying teenagers have a cancer rate 17 times the national average. According to Tom Goldtooth, executive director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, most indigenous governments are over 22 years behind the states in environmental infrastructure development. The EPA has consistently failed to fund tribes on an equitable basis compared with the states. The EPA has a statutory responsibility to allocate financial resources that will provide an equitable allocation between tribal governments and states. The Descendants of Little Thunder. In our communities, Native environmentalists sing centuries-old songs to renew life, to give thanks for the strawberries, to call home fish, and to thank Mother Earth for her blessings. We are the descendants of Little Thunder, who witnessed the massacre that cleared out the Great Plains to make way for the cowboys, cattle, and industrial farms. We have seen the great trees felled, the wolves taken for bounty, and the fish stacked rotting like cordwood. Those memories compel us, and the return of the descendants of these predators provoke us to stand again, stronger and hopefully with more allies. We are the ones who stand up to the land eaters, the tree eaters, the destroyers, and culture eaters. We live off the beaten track, out of the mainstream in small villages, on a vast expanse of prairie, on dry desert lands, or in the forests. We often drive old cars, live in old houses and mobile homes. There are usually small children and relatives around, the kids careening underfoot. We seldom carry briefcases and we rarely wear suits. You are more likely to find us meeting in a local community center, outside camping, or in someone's house than at a convention center or at a $1,000 per plate fundraiser. We organize in small groups, close to 200 of them in North America, with names like Native Americans for a Clean Environment, Dine Care, Citizens Against Ruining Our Environment, Anishinaabeg Niji, and the Gwich'in Steering Committee. We are underfunded at best, and more often not funded at all, working out of our homes with a few families or 5 to 10 volunteers. We coalesce in national or continental organizations such as Indigenous Environmental Network, a network of 200-plus members, which, through a diverse agenda of providing technical and political support to grassroots groups seeking to protect their land, preserve biodiversity, and sustain communities, seeks ultimately to secure environmental justice. Other such groups include the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice, Honor the Earth, Indigenous Women's Network, Seventh Generation Fund, and others. In addition are the regional organizations and those based on a shared ecosystem or cultural practice, such as the California Indian Basket Weavers Association, Great Lakes Basket Makers, or Council of Elders. Despite our meager resources, we are winning many hard-fought victories on the local level. We have faced down huge waste dumps and multinational mining, lumber, and oil companies. And throughout the Native nations, people continue to fight to protect Mother Earth for future generations. Some of the victories described in this book include a moratorium on mining in the sacred hills of Northern Cheyenne, Blackfeet, and Crow Territory, an international campaign that stopped the building of megadams in northern Canada, the restoration of thousands of acres of white earth land in Minnesota, and the rebuilding of a nation in Hawaii. Grassroots and land-based struggles characterize most of Native environmentalism. We are nations of people with distinct land areas, and our leadership and direction emerge from the land up. Our commitment and tenacity spring from our deep connection to the land. This relationship to land and water is continuously reaffirmed through prayer, deed, and our way of being. Minobama Deziwin, the good life. It is perhaps best remembered in phrases like, "This is where my grandmother's and children's umbilical cords are buried. That is where the great giant lay down to sleep. These are the 4 sacred mountains between which the Creator instructed us to live. That is the last place our people stopped in our migration here to this village." White Earth. I live on an Anishinaabeg reservation called White Earth in northern Minnesota, where I work on land, culture, and environmental issues locally through an organization called the White Earth Land Recovery Project, and nationally through a Native foundation called Honor the Earth. We, the Anishinaabe, are a forest culture. Our creation stories, culture, and way of life are entirely based on the forest, source of our medicinal plants and food, forest animals, and birch bark baskets. Virtually my entire reservation was clear-cut at the turn of the century. In 1874, Anishinaabe leader Wabunaquad said, "I cried and prayed that our trees would not be taken from us, for they are as much ours as is this reservation." Our trees provided the foundation for major lumber companies, including Weyerhaeuser, and their destruction continued for 10 decades. In 1889 and 1890, Minnesota led the country in lumber production, and the state's northwest region was the leading source of timber. 2 decades later, 90% of White Earth land was controlled by non-Indians, and our people were riddled with diseases. Many became refugees in nearby cities. Today, 3/4 of all tribal members live off the reservation. 90% of our land is still controlled by non-Indians. There is a direct link in our community between the loss of biodiversity, the loss of animal and plant life, and the loss of the material and cultural wealth of the White Earth people. But we have resisted and are restoring. Today, we are in litigation against logging expansion, and the White Earth Land Recovery Project works to restore the forests, recover the land, and restore our traditional forest culture. Our experience of survival and resistance is shared with many others. But it is not only about Native people. In the final analysis, the survival of Native America is fundamentally about the collective survival of all human beings. The question of who gets to determine the destiny of the land and of the people who live on it, those with the money or those who prey on the land, is a question that is alive throughout society. The question is posed eloquently by Lilwat grandmother Loretta Pascal. This is my reason for standing up. To protect all around us, to continue our way of life, our culture. I ask them, where did you get your right to destroy these forests? How does your right supersede my rights? These are our forests. These are our ancestors. These are the questions posed in the chapters ahead. Through the voices and actions featured here, there are some answers as well. Along with the best of my prayers is a recognition of the depth of spirit and commitment to all our relations, and the work to protect and recover them. As Columbia River Tribes activist Ted Strong tells us, if this nation has a long way to go before all of our people are truly created equally without regard to race, religion, or national origin, it has even farther to go before achieving anything that remotely resembles equal treatment for other creatures who called this land home before humans ever set foot upon it. While the species themselves, fish, fowl, game, and the habitat they live in, have given us unparalleled wealth, they live crippled in their ability to persist and in conditions of captive squalor. This enslavement and impoverishment of nature is no more tolerable or sensible than enslavement and impoverishment of other human beings. Perhaps it is because we are the messengers that not only our sovereignty as native governments, but our right to identify with a deity and a history, our right to hold to a set of natural laws as practiced for thousands of years, is under assault. Now, more than ever, tribal people must hold on to their timeless and priceless customs and practices. The ceremony will continue, Strong says. This is a testament to the faith of the Indian people. No matter how badly the salmon have been mistreated, no matter how serious the decline, it has only made Native people deeper in their resolve. It has doubled their commitment. It has rekindled the hope that today is beginning to grow in many young people. Chapter 1. Akwesasne, Mohawk Mother's Milk, and PCBs. In the heart of the Mohawk Nation is Akwesasne, or Land Where the Partridge Drums. A 25-square-mile reservation that spans the St. Lawrence River and the international border between northern New York and Canada. Akwesasne is home to about 8,000 Mohawks. I'm riding the Akwesasne Reservation roads with Gedji Cook, Mohawk midwife turned environmental justice activist. It is 2 o'clock in the morning, and Gedji is singing traditional Mohawk songs. Loud, so strong is her voice. We are driving between Gedji's meetings, planes, and birth practice. The birthing chair she uses is wedged in her trunk between our suitcases. Her stamina is almost daunting. That may be the gift of a life-bringer, a midwife. All that power of birth and rebirth, which stays in your presence month after month. Or perhaps it is just that she is a Mohawk, and, as Gedji jokes, if you want something done, get a Mohawk to do it. My head droops to the side as we careen down the country roads of upstate New York, and my attention rivets back to her words, her company. Gedji is alternating between singing and explaining to me the process of bioaccumulation of polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, in breast milk, a combination of Mother Teresa and Carl Sagan. She comes from a family whose tradition feeds her political work, and from a community with a long history of political resistance. My father, mother, and grandparents of past generations distinguished themselves as political and cultural activists, who upheld community service as one of their highest standards, she explains. My grandmother, Elizabeth Cannatines, she leads the village, cook, a traditional midwife, delivered me and many of the babies in my generation at the Mohawk territory at Akwesasne. My father, William Resin Cook, organized a cooperative at Akwesasne among the farmers and consumers. He also organized the peaceful ousting of New York state enforcement jurisdiction on our lands in 1948. Well, some things change, and some things do not. The Mohawks and Gedji Cook can tell you that. She is cut of the same cloth. So it is that a culture and identity that are traditionally matrilineal will come into conflict with institutions that are historically focused upon their eradication. Gedji Cook, Wolf Clan mother and an individual who strives to uphold those traditions, finds that she must confront some large adversaries. Besides catching babies, as she calls it, and raising her family of 4 children, the oldest of whom, Howie, bore her first grandchild in the winter of 1998, Gedji finds herself in a standoff against her adversary, one of the largest corporations in the world, General Motors, GM. At its Massena, New York, powertrain plant, General Motors has left a Superfund site, one with approximately 823,000 cubic yards of PCB-contaminated materials. GM has tainted the land, water, and ultimately the bodies of the Mohawk people, their babies included. Gedji's work is precedent-setting environmental justice work that links the intricate culture of the Mohawk people to the water, the turtles, the animal relatives, and ultimately the destruction of the industrialized General Motors Superfund site. Why is it we must change our lives, our way of life, to accommodate the corporations, and they are allowed to continue without changing any of their behavior? She asks. The Mohawk Legacy. Mohawk legend says that at one time the earth was one never-ending ocean. One day, a pregnant woman fell from the sky. A flock of swans carried her down to earth, gently placing her on the back of a large sea turtle. Some beavers then swam to the bottom of the ocean and picked up some soil and brought it back to this woman so she could have some dry ground on which to walk. She then walked in an ever-widening circle on the top of the turtle's back, spreading the soil around. On this giant turtle's back, the earth became whole. As a result, North America is known today by the name Turtle Island. As in the creation legend, the turtle remains the bedrock of many ecosystems. But snapping turtles found at so-called Contaminant Cove on the Akwesasne Reservation contain some 3,067 parts per million, ppm, of PCB contamination. Others were found with 2,000 parts per million PCB contamination. According to EPA guidelines, 50 parts per million PCBs in soil is considered to be contaminated. The story of how that turtle became contaminated, in many ways mirrors the story of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. The Haudenosaunee, or Six Nations Iroquois Confederacy, is among the most ancient continuously operating governments in the world. Long before the arrival of the European peoples in North America, our people met in council to enact the principles of peaceful coexistence among nations, and in recognition of the right of peoples to a continued and uninterrupted existence. European people left our council fires and journeyed forth in the world to spread principles of justice and democracy, which they learned from us, and have had profound effects upon the evolution of the modern world. Haudenosaunee Statement to the World, April 17, 1979. The Mohawk people, like other Haudenosaunee, or Six Nations peoples, have lived in the eastern region of the continent for many generations. The Mohawks themselves are referred to as the keepers of the eastern door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the people of the Flint. It is said that the Six Nations peoples were once virtual slaves to the neighboring Algonquin peoples. Amidst their agricultural economy, they'd labored long and hard to pay the heavy tolls imposed upon them by the Algonquin. But as the story goes, between miracles and sheer determination, the Six Nations peoples came to prosper in the region. As the generations passed, the differences grew between the peoples, and they divided into the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, the Six Nations. Early in their history, the great prophet Ianwada created the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, one of the most prominent and far-reaching forms of government ever created on the face of the earth. From this form of government came the concepts of constitutional government and representative democracy, the very foundation of the principles of the new American state. This form of government remains today in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The Mohawk Nation expanded under the principles of the Great Law, established by Ianwada's teacher, the Great Huron Peacemaker. That law, Kayanarakoa, the Great Law of Peace and the Good Mind, upholds principles of kinship, women's leadership, and the value of the widest possible community consensus. Through these teachings, and many others, the Mohawks eventually established communities scattered over 14 million acres of land that straddle what would become the U.S.-Canada border. These lands would come to be home for 7 major communities: Ganawage, Kanesataka, Akwesasne, Ganienka, Tydenaga, Ohsweken, and Wada. While new American leaders such as George Washington, Patrick Henry, and Benjamin Franklin studied the Haudenosaunee government, they also engaged in land speculation over territory held by these peoples, and Mohawk lands were ceded through force, coercion, and deceit, until fewer than 14,600 acres remained in New York State. By 1889, 80% of all Haudenosaunee land in New York State was under lease to non-Indian interests and individuals. For the Mohawks, words were not enough to defend their land. During the 1900s, additional land and jurisdiction grabs continued in Mohawk communities, along with Mohawk resistance to them. Whether through Gedgie's father or the armed takeovers and struggles in the Mohawk communities of Ganienka, 1974, Ganawage, 1988, or Kanesatake, 1990, the Mohawks have been vigilant in their commitment to their land, way of life, and economy. Faced with heavy impacts on their traditional economy, the Mohawks adapted economically. First, as legendary high steel workers, they built much of the infrastructure for eastern cities. Then, in more recent years, they have creatively used their strategic position on the national border to tap into the controversial export-import business, traversing colonial borders that separate the various Mohawk communities. The Mohawks are also adept at both maintaining and recovering their culture and way of life, The Akwesasne Freedom School is foundational to that process. An independent elementary school run by the Mohawk Nation.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?